Okay, let's dive into this fascinating stack of sources you've sent over.
Yeah, there's quite a bit here.
We're talking about AI, right? Specifically,
Yeah.
these big, large language models, LLMs, everyone's talking about them,
Exactly. And how we actually, figure out what they really understand.
especially outside of English. That
Hmm.
seems to be the key focus here.
That's right. The sources you shared, they really zero in on this big challenge, evaluating these models in languages that, well, tons of people speak,
Right.
but that often have less digital data available, low resource languages.
And particularly those using non-Latin scripts,
Hmm.
like we see across India.
Precisely. Hindi, Bengali, Tamil, Canada, the list goes on.
And this is a massive blind spot, isn't it, if we
No,
only test these things on English?
we just don't know. We don't know how they perform for billions of people.
So our mission for this deep dive, yours and mine, is to unpack these sources, understand this gap.
And explore this new benchmark they've developed.
Right, this new benchmark designed, hopefully, to address it.
Exactly. It's called MILU.
MILU. And the sources hit at some maybe surprising results.
Oh, definitely. The research paper, it's quite clear. When they tested the top LLMs on MILU,
Yeah.
they basically hit a wall, a surprising wall.
A wall. Oh, wait, let's just get it out there. What kind of wall are we talking about?
Well, the very best score,
Mm-hmm.
the highest average accuracy any model got on MILU
Uh-huh.
was only 74%.
74%. Wow. Okay, that is a contrast. We hear
Yeah.
about near-perfect scores on English tests all the time.
Exactly. It immediately tells you something fundamental is missing in how we usually evaluate these things.
So what's the core problem MILU is trying to fix?
It boils down to relevance, really.
Yeah.
Evaluating LLMs globally needs benchmarks that understand different languages and different cultures.
And the existing ones just don't.
They're heavily skewed, mostly English data, mostly Western knowledge, Western contexts.
Which leaves these huge gaps when you look at, like you said, low resource settings.
Yep. Languages with less digital text for training, less data for evaluation.
And the script issue makes it even harder. The non-Latin alphabets.
It adds another layer of complexity, absolutely. Think
Wow.
about Hindi Devanagari script or Tamil script. Standard tools often stumble.
So we lack a clear picture for, a huge chunk of the world population.
This is precisely why MILU was created.
Okay, so tell us about MILU itself. What is it exactly?
Right, so the name stands for Multitask Indic Language Understanding Benchmark.
Multitask Indic.
Okay, it's basically a large test set, covers multiple domains, and it primarily uses multiple choice questions, MCQs.
Ah, the MCQ format. Familiar territory for testing.
Right, makes it structured. And the scope is pretty impressive.
How so?
It covers 8 major domains. Think like science, humanities, social sciences, broken down into 41 distinct subjects.
41 subjects, wow.
And crucially, it includes tests in 11 languages.
11, so English plus 10 Indic languages.
Exactly. You've got Bengali, Gujarati, Hindi, Kannada, Malayalam, Marathi, Odia, Punjabi, Tamil, and Telugu, plus English for comparison.
What really stood out to me from the sources was this idea of an India-centric design.
Yes, that's absolutely key.
It's not just translating English tests, is it?
No, not at all. It's built from the ground up, you could say, around knowledge and problem solving that's actually relevant in India.
How do they manage that? Where did the questions come from?
So the researchers took a really interesting approach, kind of like what was done for another benchmark called AG Evil.
Right.
They collected questions from actual public exams held in India.
Wait, like real exams?
Huh.
For jobs or university entrance?
Yeah. Qualification tests, national civil services exams, state-level civil service exams, that kind of thing.
Okay, that feels incredibly practical, grounded in what people actually need to know there.
Exactly. And it makes the benchmark much more meaningful, culturally speaking.
Can you give an example? How does it differ from, say, a standard benchmark like MMLU? The sources mentioned that comparison.
Right. Table 1 in the paper shows this really well. MMLU might have a question about, I don't know, a classic U.S. Supreme Court case like Marbury versus Madison.
Okay, standard U.S. civic history.
Or maybe a complex physics problem or probability theory, more academic, maybe more globally applicable STEM stuff.
Right.
MILU, on the other hand, it might ask about a specific policy decision made by the Maharashtra state government.
Ah, very specific.
Or it could ask for details about the Pradhan Mantri Kisan Samman Nidhi scheme,
Which is?
a major Indian government agricultural support program. Very India-specific knowledge.
Wow, okay. That really drives home the difference. It's not just about the language, but the knowledge embedded in the culture, the
Like what?
governance.
The social context.
And using regional state exams, that sounds smart too.
Yeah, that was a clever move. It ensures they get coverage of state-level topics, things specific to, say, Tamil Nadu or Punjab.
And in the specific official languages used in those states.
Exactly, which a national exam might gloss over.
Building this must have been a monumental task. The source said they started with over 150,000 questions.
Oh, it was a huge effort. Absolutely. Collecting is one thing, but then cleaning it.
Right, the quality control.
They used several layers of filtering, some manual review, people actually looking at questions.
Yeah.
And also automated tools, cleaning out noise, making sure the language identification was correct. They mentioned using tools specifically for Indic scripts, which is important.
And removing duplicates, I assume.
Yes, duplicates near duplicates. Very thorough.
Did they have to exclude certain types of questions to keep it focused?
They did. They specifically took out things like reading comprehension based on long passages.
Okay.
Also, any questions that relied on images. And anything with more than 4 answer options, just to keep the format consistent. MCQ, 4 options.
Right, standardized.
Mm.
So after all that filtering, what did the final benchmark dataset look like? How big is it?
They ended up releasing around 79,000 unique high-quality questions.
79,000. That's still massive.
It is. And for the actual evaluations, the way they tested the models, they capped each subject language pair at 500 questions.
Got it. To keep things balanced, maybe?
Seems likely. And interestingly, about a quarter, 25%, were translated from English sources.
Okay.
But the vast majority, 75%, were sourced directly in the original Indic languages, which is great for authenticity.
And I think the source mentioned variation in question length, too.
Yeah, the average length of a question wasn't uniform across all the languages, just another variable to consider.
So with tens of thousands of questions, how did they get them organized into those 41 subjects and 8 domains you mentioned earlier? That sounds complex.
It was. The original tags on the questions were very specific, sometimes overlapping, a bit messy, probably.
Right.
So they used some clever AI techniques. Embedding models.
Okay. Turning words into numbers that capture meaning.
Sort of, yeah. Capturing semantic similarity, and then clustering techniques to group those similar numerical representations together.
Grouping similar concepts.
Exactly. That automated process, followed by careful manual review and refinement, let them bundle those fine-grained tags into the 41 distinct subjects.
And those subjects then roll up into the 8 main domains.
Correct. Which gives a nice broad overview.
Could you remind us of those domains?
Sure. It was arts and humanities, social sciences, environmental sciences, law and governance, health and medicine, science, engineering, and technology, and business studies.
Pretty comprehensive. Did the sources say how the questions were distributed across them?
Yeah, they gave some percentages. Science was the largest, around 21.5%. Arts and humanities was next, about 19.5%. Law and governance was also significant, around 9.4%.
Okay, so we had this huge, detailed, culturally relevant benchmark.
Yeah.
Carefully constructed.
Yep.
Now, the big reveal, the results. What actually happened when they tested the big LLMs against MILU?
Well, like we said up front, the results are pretty stark.
Stark how?
Current LLMs struggle significantly. Across the board.
And even the best one, GPT-4o, you mentioned.
Correct. GPT-4o had the highest average accuracy across all the languages and tasks.
But only hit 74%.
Just 74%, which again is way, way below the kind of performance we see on those English-centric, often Western knowledge-heavy benchmarks.
That number, 74%, it really hammers the point home, doesn't it? It's not a small dip. It's a major gap in understanding this specific context.
It really is. And the analysis went deeper than just the top score. They tested over 42 different LLMs.
42. Wow. So the big names.
Oh, yeah. Models from OpenAI, Google, Meta, GPT series, Gemini, Llama, Gemma.
Okay.
But also models developed specifically with India or Indic languages in mind, like Aya, Sarvam, Krutrim.
Ah, interesting.
Yeah.
How did those different types of models compare? Like the general multilingual ones versus the India-specific ones?
That was actually one of the more surprising findings, I thought. The big open source multilingual models like Llama, for example, they generally performed better on MILU.
Better than
the models that were specifically fine-tuned on Indic language data.
Really? That seems counterintuitive. You'd expect the specialized models to do better on a specialized benchmark.
You would, but those fine-tuned models, according to the paper, performed only slightly better than just random guessing on many parts of MILU.
Wow. Only just above random chance. Any idea why?
The paper suggests maybe the broader models, despite struggling overall, have more general capability that helps a bit, while the fine-tuned ones might be, I don't know, overfitting to their specific training data, or maybe they lack the sort of foundational breadth needed for this kind of complex, culturally aware reasoning.
Huh. That is surprising. Okay, what about performance within MILU? Did models do better in certain languages or subjects?
Absolutely. There were clear patterns. Performance was generally better in the languages within the benchmark that are considered higher resource.
Like Hindi, maybe, compared to Odia or Punjabi, perhaps?
Potentially, yeah. Languages with more existing digital data tend to see slightly better performance, even within this challenging benchmark. That kind of makes sense.
And across the domains, like science versus law.
Big difference there. The models performed notably worse in the culturally specific domains.
Arts and humanities, law and governance. Those ones.
Exactly. Compared to how they did on more, let's say, universal fields like STEM science, technology, engineering, math.
Which loops right back to the whole point of the India-centric design, doesn't it?
Perfectly. It's showing the cracks precisely where general global training data doesn't cut it, where you need that specific cultural, social, legal knowledge.
So MILU is really highlighting these specific weaknesses.
That's why the researchers position it as, the first benchmark of its kind with this level of detail, this focus specifically on Indic languages and contexts.
It really feels like an essential tool then, a vital step towards evaluating LLMs more comprehensively, more culturally awarely, if that's a word.
I think so. It sets a new standard, or at least points the way.
And importantly, they're sharing it.
Yes, that's crucial. To encourage more research, more development in this area, they've made everything public.
The code, the data set itself.
All of it. The code, the benchmark data, other artifacts. It's out there on platforms like Hugging Face and GitHub. The sources linked to them. Open science.
That's great. Fostering open research.
Yeah. Right.
Okay, so wrapping up this deep dive, it gives you, the listener, a really crystal clear picture, I think.
Mm-hmm.
These large language models, they're incredibly powerful, they're evolving super fast.
No doubt about that.
But this MILU research gives us hard evidence, concrete proof that they still have significant limitations, big ones.
Especially when you move beyond English, beyond the dominant culture.
Right. When it comes to genuinely understanding diverse languages, especially lower resource ones, and getting the deep, culturally specific knowledge,
Yeah.
like the kind you find across the incredibly rich landscape of India.
They're just not there yet.
So you now have, hopefully, a solid grasp of this important new evaluation tool, MILU, and the specific critical challenges it throws into sharp relief about where AI capabilities stand today.
Beyond the usual hype,
Yeah.
Reality check.
Exactly. Which leaves you with this maybe provocative thought to chew on.
Okay.
Given that even the most advanced LLMs, the GPT-4os of the world, struggle this much with culturally specific knowledge in lower resource languages, what does that really mean for using them in the real world, globally?
Good question.
How do we make sure AI development actually benefits everyone, not just people in places where training data is easy to get and benchmarks already exist?
What needs to change?
Yeah. What fundamental shifts do we need in how models are trained, how they're evaluated, to actually bridge this critical gap, to make AI truly universal, truly relevant everywhere?